Hello, and welcome back to Three of Swords Gaming. We are going to continue our Guild Wars 2 personal story playthrough now that Janthir Wilds has launched. So this is the most recent expansion for Guild Wars 2, and seems to be a solid release. I think, for me, my personal opinion is that it's a touch overrated by a lot of the folks who are raving about it, but I do think it's strong. I do think it's off to a good start. Um, it's worth noting that Secrets of the Obscure got off to a good start as well, and then turned out to not be nearly as good in its subsequent releases. So the launch was great, and then the first, second, and third patch that came after that launch, um, each was successively worse than the one that preceded it. So certainly we are hoping that the experience is not the same with Janthir Wilds. But Janthir Wilds is off to a strong launch, and of course, a big part of that is the housing system that they've introduced, which is a fun thing, something that I've been wanting to see in Guild Wars 2 for a long time. And we will, of course, enter that at some point in the story, and we will get our new updated war claw as well. So both those things are positive things. So we want to jump into it. I think the first thing we're going to do here is check our mail, because that should be where the story starts, although I haven't activated it yet. So probably the rest of this is either things from other accounts or other administrative things from the expansion. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, another year of Guild Wars 2. It has been around for a long time now. Yeah, my coins have changed. Tracking on that. I gotta focus. Got some die. These are things I sent myself. And the same focus again. Alright, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna drop that stuff in the bank, because I probably already actually have Mojo unlocked on this account. Oh, I don't. Okay, well, I'm glad I sent it to myself. What about that? Okay, so a couple of skins unlocked. What about these dies? I already had one of them unlocked. Alright. Several of those dies came from a mess of keys that I had on my main account from some map completion. And so the excess dies that I already had unlocked, I dropped onto this account. Alright. We'll circle back around to these things later. Oh, I have a key on this account too. Look at that. But no chest on this character. So let's move into the story. I will caution. Oh, that's not where to look for it. I will caution that the first story instance is quite long and has a lot of talking. But it's very lore heavy. Lots of interesting characters. So we will have that going for us at least. And there's our new mail. So, dear Pact Commander, following the aftermath of the demonic attacks on our cities, political leaders of this world have decided to act. I would like to discuss the first summit of the Tyrian Alliance at your earliest convenience. Countess Anise and I will be waiting for you in Divinity's Reach. Sincerely, Queen Jenna of Kryta. Alright, so we'll go talk to Anise and Jenna about this. Let's get on something a touch faster. So it's already worth noting that unlike some previous expansions and content that ArenaNet has provided us, the world is not apparently immediately on fire. Instead, we get this Tyrian Alliance invitation. Now, in fairness, the world was not immediately on fire with Ended Dragons either, though there were plenty of unresolved things.
Apologies, Commander. Her Majesty is occupied. I've been asked to direct you to Countess Anise instead.
Okie dokie. So, no entering the throne room. We have been directed to talk to Countess Anise, who's over here by the various representatives of the gods and kind of this pantheon of the gods sort of thing that's been in here since launch. Anise, what do you got for us?
Commander. Too long.
Too long indeed.
Countess, the pleasure is mine. I thought I was meeting with the Queen.
My liege is indisposed. I appreciate your flexibility.
Oh? I hope all is well. Hate to see even more flippancy tossed at her feet.
I can certainly hope, but I'm afraid drama clings to her like a bad smell. Good luck washing the linens. But that's unimportant. For now. On my queen's behalf, I would like to extend an invitation. The first meeting of the Tyrian Alliance will be commencing in Lion's Arch. We would like to see you there.
The Tyrian Alliance?
Correct. Might be stuffy. But I expect some interesting developments. The world is changing. We know this. Between the demon attacks, Suwan and Oreen, we woke up to a very different world. Now, let's hope everyone is willing to keep it in one piece. Before I forget, your invitation.
All right, and we got an invitation. So, truthfully, this conversation with Countess Anise doesn't give us a lot, but most of it makes sense in context once we get to this meeting. So I'm going to kind of refrain from going into detail on it now, and we're going to go to the meeting and allow it to kind of make sense once it all comes together. We should read our mail real quick, though. It's long. Also from Queen Jenna, to the esteemed Pack Commander, it is with the highest respect that the founding committee of the Tyrian Alliance, which we will learn about soon, would like to invite you to join our organization of trust and dignity. I almost feel like the Queen didn't write this because it's written in such a stuffy way that, she probably had some aide write it, and it's like a standardized invitation sent out to, whoever or whatever. We hope for a brighter tomorrow after the passing of Suwan marked a new era for Tyria. But something pushed back on that hope when a series of demonic attacks left our people and our homes in peril. Although these attacks have recently waned, their source has not yet been discovered, and until it has, we are vulnerable. So, as you may recall, in Secrets of the Obscure, the Wizards, the Arcane Council, is that right? Have not disclosed their presence to the world. So, the rifts, remember rift hunting, that content that was advertised as content was kind of non-content. That was essentially these invasions in the world of the Cryptus. Tyria, by and large, did not have any context for that. And thus, these attacks recently waned. Their source has not yet been discovered. Of course, it waned because we succeeded in Secrets of the Obscure in kind of putting a stop to that. But the rifts, which continue because, people are still, farming their armor. I don't have the armor yet either. I don't know if I'm going to pursue it or not. Initially, I'd planned to, but I disliked Soto so much that there's a good possibility I don't ever actually make that armor. Because the rifts continue, the idea is that some loyalists of Eparch continue to, invade Tyria because they're just bound and determined to do that, apparently. From that vulnerability, something else was born. Awareness. Leaders started speaking with leaders. Nations once impaired by archaic rivalries were suddenly allies or on their way. Pain was shared as readily as food. After we survived the fight against the Elder Dragons, surely the next threat to rise in their place would not stop us, and it has not stopped us. I am so motivated. As leaders talked, we realized that it was time again to try our hand at unity. Not all will agree, and we certainly have our critics, but peace isn't made overnight. Thus, the Tyrian Alliance was formed. Commander, you've been a constant glimmer of hope in times of ire. That's good, times of ire. You've impacted each of our lives in immeasurable ways. Yeah, I am so tired of the Commander being like the end-all, be-all. It was a mistake made long, long ago by ArenaNet in the way they wrote Guild Wars 2, and they can't ever really take it back. Super unfortunate that the Commander is like the Dovahkiin. That's fine for a one-player game, but it just doesn't work for Guild Wars 2, and yet we've been saddled with it for 10 years now. You've impacted each of our lives in immeasurable ways. It is for that reason you are invited to join the Lion's Arch for celebration and trust. The Alliance may be new, but with time it will become something truly admirable and productive. For Tyria, for all of us. Blah, blah, blah. Queen Jenna. Alright, Jenna. Let's see what this Tyrian Alliance is all about. And of course, that letter gives us a much better idea of what it's about, which is that it is, an assembly from all the different collective races of Tyria coming together. It's almost like a United Nations Security Council vibe is kind of what we're getting here. And our incredibly attractive and charming commander here is a keynote speaker because, after all, we have saved the world time and time again. I love that I'm doing this story honestly, because I've been so busy with work and work-related things and other stuff. I'm doing this like a full, almost 2 weeks after launch. Thus, there aren't like 60 people standing here. That is nice. So, the Guild Initiative. When Lion's Arch was rebuilt, this was added, which of course was also around the time that like guild halls were introduced and stuff, so that all kind of came together. I always imagined that a little bit more would happen here than did. Of course, the NPCs that already existed, like the Guild Registrar and Guild Bank, were moved here. But then also within this place, if we were to, bypass our little story entry thing and just come in here, which certainly we could do real quick, then what we'd find is like the folks who launched the expeditions for guild halls are in here. They should all be kind of over here. So we got Kaga, Sarah Mackenzie, and Mr. Nguyen. I think this is for the Cantha one. These are for the two that are in... no, wait a minute. One of them's Heart of Thorns, one of them's Pathfire. I think Sarah here is the Pathfire Guild Hall. Is Kaga both of the Heart of Thorns Guild Halls? Don't remember. But that was kind of what primarily this ended up being. And there are some vendors in here, but these vendors will also be in your guild hall anyway, so it's kind of irrelevant. But yeah, that's what this has been for a long time, which means once your guild is established and you have a guild hall, you pretty much never come back here. I've been in here like a handful of times over the last 5 to 10 years, and that was really more out of curiosity or novelty than anything else. But now we're coming here for story. So let's do it. Let's scope out the Tyrian Alliance. Let's see what this meeting's all about.
Ready for anything.
So am I. I also am ready for anything. No dogs in the guild initiative.
Hold it. Name.
Commander, over here.
That you are. Didn't recognize the face at first. Fought alongside you during Scarlet's attack. Go ahead. Don't mind me, just being cautious. A lot of big names in this building.
It's a big job.
So I'm going to be honest. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that dialogue. In fact, it's not bad at all. And there were a whole bunch of Lion Guard fighting with us when we fought Scarlet. It's worth noting. So I don't think there's anything wrong with any of that dialogue. It annoys the hell out of me for some reason. Don't know why, but certainly there's nothing wrong with it. All right. So waiting on us is Malice and Anise. And of course, we remember Malice, who played a prominent role in Icebrood Saga. And we may have seen a time or two since then, but definitely Icebrood Saga, major player there. Anise, we can't seem to get rid of. If you like her, that's great. You can get a close-up of Anise here. Quite a looker. She has her moments, but she also has her moments where she's incredibly annoying. And there are any number of kind of conspiracy theories about what Anise is or is not. And, at one point, she kind of makes a veiled reference to the fact that she may be much older than she appears. So maybe the fact that she's been a looker for the last 12 years now, 13, however old Guild Wars 2 is, maybe that's never going to change because she is, after all, an incredibly powerful mesmer, as is the Queen. They are both mesmers. Of course, when you create a character, you can make a mesmer of any race, but kind of in the game's lore, mesmers tend to be more associated with the human race than the other races. Not exclusive to, but more commonly found among the humans. Mesmers also tend to be distrusted and maybe a little bit disliked by a lot of people. But that's what Anise is. All right, Malice. Anise, what's up? We'll start with Malice here.
Malice, Anise. This thing is really shaping up, isn't it?
No less cramped than any of Ash's hidden outposts.
Delegates and leaders are still arriving, but the turnout is impressive. My surprise is agreeable.
And nerve-wracking.
Everyone is comforted that you're joining us. You command quite a bit of respect here. Not all of us do the same.
Here we go.
You're modest.
Save that irascible demeanor for negotiations, Imperator. Go on. Mingle. As soon as a few more arrive, we'll get started.
All right, and in the interest of story playthrough, we are going to mingle. So I'm a little uncertain why Anise would, kind of be self-deprecating about the amount of respect she commands. I would assume her reputation precedes her, given the nature of her character. But I don't know. Maybe not, or maybe, she is very manipulative, so maybe that's kind of a manipulative thing on her part. All right, there's a piece of paper laying over here. Somebody dropped their invitation or discarded it. So this is one to the Arcane Council. Are we going to read all these? I don't think I'm going to read all the way through all of these. What I will point out, should you play through yourself, say each one of these are very unique to who they are addressed to. Um, and I think that's a nice touch. So somebody did put a lot of effort into all of them. They are worth looking for. There's an achievement. It's a small achievement. I think it's 1 achievement point. See, here's another one. So this one is to Keen, which is Dougal Keen, a character that has been in the game for a while, but is actually a character from one of the books. Right? He's an explorer, as I recall, and is the leader of the guild initiative, if I am not mistaken. And essentially, this letter is Countess Anise asking to use the guild initiative hall as kind of a neutral ground. Lion's Arch already being something of a neutral ground when it comes to the races, and then the guild initiative being a neutral ground within that, and thus an ideal place for this meeting versus like one of the capital cities, for example. And of course, the last time that all the world's leaders came together like this, it was not on neutral ground. It was in the Grove, and that's when the Pale Tree was grievously wounded by Mordramoth. Something that happened roughly 10 years ago now, and will, spoiler alert, actually come up again here in a minute. So kind of an interesting thing. What's interesting about this letter is this. There's a paragraph here. So the preceding paragraph, we've come a long way since the treaties. Dougal, I'm not known to daydream, but I wouldn't let Her Majesty hold council with a room full of ulterior motives and competing personalities if I didn't think the risk was worth the reward. I've woken up too many mornings dreading news of death, or more death and destruction. I'm tired of it. Thankfully, everyone else is too. When Kree, the paragraph swirls before your eyes, dispersing like dye in water. Must be some sort of mesmer illusion. Whatever it says, this last part is for Dougal's eyes only. It's of note, in my opinion at least, when you have like secrets and little foreshadowing related to lore and stuff, there's always lots of room for interpretation. Krisha is standing right here. And in this letter, immediately preceding that the paragraph that disappears, we've come a long way since the treaties, which I believe to be a reference to the treaties between the Char and the humans, which put an end to the war between the Char and the humans. When Kree, and then the paragraph disappears, is it a reference to Krisha? Does Dougal Keen have a secondary mission that's related to a conversation with Krisha? And I believe, is Dougal like right up here maybe? I think Dougal's in this general vicinity as well. So here's Dougal. The closest person to Krisha right now is Dougal. Hey, you here for the meeting? It's downstairs. You're not going to join? Letting them use this building is enough participation for me. Not huge on politics, but hey, I'm not arguing with the gifts they brought. Canthan spices, dried fruit from Alona. Yeah, diplomacy has some tasty perks. More of a consolation prize than a perk. Hurry things along down there, will you? Okay. The closest person to Krisha is Dougal. And one might speculate that could be a secondary order for Krisha and Dougal to have some sort of conversation related to the ongoing efforts to, bring Char and humans closer together. Because remember, if we can look at the whole map here, we can. There's still conflict between some Char and some humans down here in Fields of Ruin. So there are still unresolved issues, at least in the eyes of some. All right, Krisha, what are your thoughts on the matter?
Commander, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
A lot of big names in this crowd.
Certainly beats interrogations and trial preparations.
Bengar.
Who else? We'll save that headache for opening remarks. I'm eager to put it behind us. Hasn't made things easy, though. The Dominion lives. Their numbers are just depleted.
I don't envy your workload.
So there's a little bit. Of course, we remember Bangar from Icebrood Saga, and by the end of before the end of Icebrood Saga, like halfway through Icebrood Saga, we capture him, and he is essentially the mouthpiece for Jormag at that point, but no longer the leader of the Dominion and the Frost Legion. That becomes Krisha and Ritlock's son. What's his name? Ryland. But so they're holding Bangar, which is fine and may lead to some more interesting stories in the future. But it is notable that that's a deviation from like level 10 Char story, level 20 Char story, where Chars who commit offenses against like Char society are kind of like just put down. And so you would think that would happen more with Bangar than anyone else, especially since he engineered a civil war. And yet we don't see that. They're holding him. She does make mention of interrogation, so maybe they feel like they need intelligence that he has to gain the upper hand on the battlefield. But so much of the war happened after Bangar was captured that you wouldn't think he actually had like timely information. Ryland was the one with the timely information, and of course he did die at the end of Icebrood Saga, which was unfortunate for Ritlock and Krisha. That was actually one of the story twists, or one of the things that takes place that I felt did resonate a bit with the player. I felt that was a powerful move, maybe potentially cliche, but given all the cliche things that ArenaNet does in the story, probably much to the enjoyment of most of the players. It was not terribly egregious. All right, so we got Queen Jenna here with Ayumi and Empress Een. Ayumi is from End of Dragons, I believe. I believe she was a representative from some of the Tengu in End of Dragons. There's another Tengu running around here, if I'm not mistaken, who's a representative from the, what is it, Winds of Dominion of Winds, right? What is that down here? Like hanging out right here? Oh, there it is. Dominion of Winds. So I believe we have a representative from Dominion of Winds, but Ayumi represents End of Dragons type Tengu, if I'm not mistaken. And then Empress Een, of course, the Canthan Empress. Queen Jenna. What's up, Queen Jenna?
It is a genuine pleasure to see a familiar face in unfamiliar lands.
Welcome, Commander. I'm glad to finally have a meeting under less dire circumstances.
An empress and a queen. Dangerous combination.
Queen Jenna has been instrumental in Cantha's integration. I'm eager for these meetings to commence.
All I've done is make introductions.
With every trade organization and leader between the Shiver Peaks and the unending ocean. Such modesty. I'm hoping that today is productive, if not educational.
The latter, I can promise.
Alright, so it is kind of fun to see, if you really want to like deep dive the world of Tyria and so forth. It is kind of fun to see like a contrast between Jenna and Een. Jenna still barefoot, always has been very sparse in what she wore, regal enough, I suppose, but nothing compared to Empress Een here, who is quite made up for the occasion. And they, while both speaking in a certain bureaucratic fashion, it's also very different. Where Een leans more heavily into platitudes and Jenna leans more heavily into ambiguities and like diplo speak. So kind of an interesting thing. Over here we have Dagonet, one of the firstborn from the Sylvari. He does pop up in some of the Pact stuff. I think we see him at times in Heart of Thorns, if I'm not mistaken. And then we got Kaith, who we seemingly cannot get rid of, one of my least favorite characters. But here she is.
Kaith, what are you doing?
And the commander is apparently happy to see her.
Commander, I'd heard you'd been invited. Glad to see you again.
Kaith is joining me as counsel. We've both a stake in seeing our people thrive after everything we've endured.
I empathize with your pain. How are you doing after Aurene?
Some days are melancholy, but she still guides me. I'm needed by my people. That has given me purpose.
That they do. Kaith has been vital in our pursuit of healing. We've all experienced a bit of an identity crisis after Maguma. We're well on our way, but we've problems to solve for yet.
Any step forward is a positive one.
So, again, not a fan of Kaith, personally. Don't like her. Don't like her at all. I recently listened to Muckluck and some of his stuff um, on this release. He's quickly, well, it's been true for over a year now that he's been by far my favorite content creator. And he seems to have like a very visceral reaction to Bram, who's hanging out up here. I don't have quite that strong a reaction to Bram. For me, it's Kaith. What they both have in common is they've both done reprehensible things and seem to get a free pass. And so, he went on a bit about that in some of his recent streams and videos, and I got a kick out of it because for me, that is Kaith. I absolutely despise her. Good dialogue though throughout, and I will say thus far, throughout Janthir Wilds, pretty good dialogue writing. I like it. I'm a fan. Here's another invitation. This one is to the Great House of the Dominion of Winds. So that is the Tengu. Now, of course, the Dominion of Winds thing is very interesting because up until one of the Dragon Response missions from Icebrood Saga, which took place it started, where did it start? It starts way over here, and you kind of move along like this, and ultimately end up fighting the boss right here, and you meet a Tengu from Dominion of Winds. That is, as far as I know, with the exception of here in Lion's Arch, there are a few Tengu which guard this gate to the Dominion of Winds. There may be Tengu also guarding a gate right here. Kind of like it's right over here. If I remember correctly, I know there's a gate there, but it's locked. It's aesthetic in nature. I can't remember if there's Tengu outside this one. There are Tengu outside the gate in Lion's Arch. But they're not really substantive characters. The first substantive character that we had from the Dominion of Winds is right here. This Calidris Sparrowhawk. You see Dominion of Winds, Royal Messenger. So to extend an invitation to those Tengu is very notable because they have been completely, just like Cantha was cut off, they also have done everything in their power to remain cut off from the rest of Tyria. So their participation would be notable, right? We have no way of knowing if they experience Cryptus invasions or not. Unless Caldris mentioned, I don't remember if she does or not. Bram. So I am not a hater on Bram the way some people are. Although following Icebrood Saga, he would be easier to dislike, kind of to Muckluck's point. I did not find him nearly as dislikable in Heart of Thorns or Season 3 as a lot of people did, because I felt that I did not think his portrayal was as much of a stretch as, say, Kaith's, for example. And I as I've pointed out numerous times, Bram and Taimi were both minors in Season 1, Season 2, and potentially even Heart of Thorns. And Casimir is also portrayed as being exceptionally young. So we have at least 2, maybe 3 minors in Dragon's Watch for a good portion of the time that Dragon's Watch exists, which I find really bizarre. Really weird writing on the part of ArenaNet. But so we've kind of had to go for this ride where Bram kind of matures into a grown-ass man. And we get a little bit of that here in this conversation we're about to have. But in fairness to the idea that Bram is reprehensible, Icebrood Saga made him a real problem. Where at the end of the day, it's hard to give him a free pass on the sheer number of lives that were lost during Dragonstorm and stuff like that.
Commander!
Bram, what are you... what happened?
Graham is representing Kragstead, acting as my own advisor.
Bram? Your advisor? Someone died.
Gawk all you need. I went home for a while after. The whole thing was an accident. One day I'm patching homesteads and caring for lone wolf pups, and the next I'm... well, here.
You? Leading an entire village? I'm impressed.
He's modest. He proved to be the leader Kragstead needed, and irreplaceable while I've helped take on more for Newt. A natural leader, oh boy.
Stop.
I'm glad for you, Bram. Air would be proud.
So just like our dialogue with Kaith, our dialogue with Bram, our personal feelings of some of these characters are really put to the wayside by ArenaNet's writing and the voice acting of whoever the commander is. So whether you or I or whoever else don't like some of these characters, the commander's response is the commander's response. We have to kind of live with that, and that is the case here with Bram. I will point out that Bram's actions in regard to Kragstead all the way back in Season 1 really represent the best of Bram. That is what Bram always should have been, and what he could have been is someone who fought for what he cared about and stood up for what was right. And that was Bram in Season 1. At the very beginning, the way we meet Bram is him seeking help to defend his village, and the commander helping him when no one else will. And he was willing to stand up for that, even when Newt and Air and the others weren't willing to stand up for it. So our first introduction to Bram is really Bram at his best and represents something positive. And then, he kind of becomes a lot of the things that, it kind of becomes the meme that Bram became. I will say, for what it's worth, I like Beard Bram. It's a good look. I'm not a huge fan, but I'm at least willing to defend him a little bit, whereas I absolutely love Keith. Counselor Ludo.
Counselor Ludo. That's a lot of paperwork for one Asura.
Couldn't get a single one of those old sacks to put down the gavel and at least try to make friends. Did send me with a giant pile of paperwork, though. That's what I'd like to call the Asuran hello. Nonsense, most of it. Cantha is revealed. And if not for copying Asuran ingenuity, they'd still be decades behind. But we can't hide in our labs.
A little competition never hurt anyone. Much.
I certainly do hope that you are correct.
So I quite like the ongoing exchanges regarding Counselor Ludo and Empress Een, who's still out in the lobby, I guess, somewhere, regarding like technology between the Asurans and the Canthans. Really kind of a fun thing. I remember playing through Cantha and thinking, wow, some of this exceeds what the Asura do, and that must be like super weird. I kind of didn't like that from a gameplay or from a like lore perspective. I didn't love that we got to Cantha and they were like, like the holographs and the TV holograph news, like 24/7 news thing. Of course, I never liked the commander's communicator either. I always thought it was a terrible, terrible exposition device. And I've said that repeatedly. That's just an awful thing. However, having said that, when I got to Cantha and all these things were happening, I'm like, oh wow, like the Asura would really be riled by that. And it's fun that we get that here. Form
Just one more confirmation of how
0517B. She's here on official travel. I like this is actually, like the form and then official versus personal travel. And like, it reminds me a little bit of being in the military when you fill out like travel paperwork and stuff like that. Kind of a fun touch. All right. We've spent quite a lot of time looking at a variety of things. Let's get this party started.
I, Countess Anise, liaison to Queen Jenna of Kryta, call all representatives of the Tyrian Alliance to council. Please, to your places.
Some of the characters came here after I talked to them. And of course, somehow we have to wait for Kaith, Dagonet, Een, and Ayumi. Not complaining, just a note.
To cover. First and foremost, the Pact and Orders send their regards. Structural changes have them occupied. But with that aside, the founding members have come prepared with opening statements. Affirmations of why we're here. As our mutually elected emissary, Commander, would you like to determine the order of operations?
What qualifies me to make that call?
You've had a hand in just about everything Tyria has endured since the retaking of Claw Island. We approve.
I imagine the Pale Mother supports this notion.
Sure, have at it.
Yeah, I like the Asuran response. All right. Oh, going back to the Asuran thing, by the way, we call that the Asuran hello. Why does that sound really, really weird and dirty to me? That sounds like a kink, the Asuran hello. Just an observation. Countess Anise and the Queen get things started. It is worth noting they mention that the Orders and the Pact are not represented here because they're going through structural changes. As you may recall, Logan has taken over the Pact, and I'm assuming that's what it's in reference to. It's nice for them to put the Pact on the back burner after us being Pact Commander for so long. I appreciate that. So if you're playing through this and you feel like this is an exceptionally long instance, click on this bottom one. Let's get straight to Jenna's remarks, and you can skip a lot of time in this instance. And of course, you can skip all the different conversations I've had and looking at the letters and stuff too. And while it's still a relatively long instance, it's going to come in at like 20 minutes maybe, if you just skip as much as possible. It won't be like the 45 minutes this is going to end up being, or more. We're already at 35 apparently, although that includes my talking at the beginning. All right, so of all these things, where do I want to start? Well, I think, End of Dragons wasn't that long ago, and because Cantha was completely separated from the rest of Tyria, I actually, on my playthrough on my main account, I started with this because I feel like this is the most lore-appropriate place to start when you consider the significance of these things. The state of the Sylvari, like, hey, the Sylvari have had a lot of time to tell us about. The Pale Tree that was 10 years ago, man. Bangar's Trial, I've already talked about why I feel like that's, it's weird that that's even a thing that's happening. I'm surprised they didn't just kill him. We'll get to this. This is fun. Updates from the Norn. Look how ambiguous this is. What are the Norn doing? They're drinking and fighting. This is actually, to me, like, very lore relevant in terms of the progression of the game. So let's start with that.
Esteemed leaders, I am thankful to have met a few of you before. Queen Jenna has made many of these introductions. For those of you I have not met, I am Empress In of Cantha. I was advised to send a liaison in my stead, but I wanted to show the face of the Empire. Cantha's integration into Tyrian politics has not been swift or easy. But it is considered our greatest priority in the wake of the Elder Dragon event. Our people are largely united in wanting, but like all nations, an underbelly of resistance remains. However, I want to pull us from the murk and into the light. Cantha's technologies are vast, some might say superior, and I firmly believe that we offer something unique. And clearly share similar passions with our neighbors. Together, imagine what we could accomplish. While we are focused on diplomacy, we've had a secondary goal of enlisting archivists from across continents. Our libraries and history texts are woefully dated.
Okay, so a couple interesting things there. One, it's kind of fun that she looks directly at Counselor Ludo when talking about their technologies being superior. And of course, Ludo has that kind of response. Fun little thing, and we'll get more of that here in a minute from Ludo. In fact, we'll probably go to that immediately next. But also, I think more interesting, so she mentions that there are some resisting the change and resisting Cantha kind of integrating with Restyria. That is obviously the Ministry of Purity. What's really interesting, and I actually think this is either ArenaNet stumbled into something good, or actually was like really, really good in writing this tiny little piece, and I'm really impressed by it, is that she then turns around and says, we're gathering archivists to update our history and the accuracy of our texts when it comes to all the things that have happened in the world. In fact, what is the exact... We've had a secondary goal of enlisting archivists from across continents. Our libraries and history texts are woefully dated. I think that is directly related to their desire to smoothen the integration with the rest of Tyria. Not just because knowing what happened in Tyria is relevant, but because when you look at the Ministry of Purity, generally these kind of racial or otherwise, like these prejudices that run along certain lines are often... I'm going to sound like a huge leftist here, but it is, I think, fundamentally true that knowledge is the enemy of prejudice, right? And of course, we saw in game how the Ministry of Purity kind of thrived off propaganda and having books. There's an event where you go through a library and like search for Ministry of Purity books and remove them because they've been planted there by the Ministry of Purity. This like propaganda has been inserted in this library, and so I think that's directly related, and I think they did that on purpose, if I had to speculate, and I like it. It's a nice touch. All right, so we heard from Cantha. Let's hear from the Asura what they think about the Canthans and how that's going.
Counselor Ludo of the Arcane Council. I'll keep it brief. As you can observe, I am the only present representative from the council. We are experiencing growing pains. Cantha's prowess threw us for a loop. I may be alone in this thinking, but about damn time.
For a long while, the Council has lazily relied on Asuran Magitech superiority. We've become complacent, our research secondary. I, and a few others, have been advocating for a more productive integration into the global sector. No disrespect intended, but Kantha's advancements on our designs? Well, frankly, it's insulting. Our knowledge is still unmatched.
An interesting choice of words. Know that I enjoy competition. In fact, I encourage it.
As do I. My first significant motion on the Arcane Council has been to eliminate any restrictions on admittance into the Asuran colleges. Our next focus will be on global equitable information exchange. That's all, for now.
Okay, so a couple of observations about the Asuran line here and kind of what Counselor Ludos has going on. One, I really think relative to the Asura, Counselor Ludo is actually very progressive. She recognizes, you can read between the words that she actually recognizes they are being given a genuine run for their money technologically from the Canthans. And she appears to express that she really wants that to be a motivating factor for the Asurans to put forth the effort to regain their technological superiority, versus what would be like the more conservative approach of saying, well, we're gonna stick to what we know best and kind of dig in. And then what super interesting towards the end there, my first significant motion on the Arcane Council has been to eliminate any restrictions on admittance into the Asuran colleges. So your first response might be to say, well, I don't see how that's going to help the Asurans get ahead. It seems like that helps everyone else catch up with the Asurans. But on the contrary, the best way to... If you realize that you are not as competitive as you want to be, or you're losing your competitive edge at a global level when it comes to like technology and education and advancement, bringing in experts from elsewhere and then attempting to retain them, whether it's through money or through culture or whatever the case may be, getting them to marry someone from your country to stay, something like that. That is one of the best ways to freshen your talent pool, is to bring in talent externally if you're having trouble generating it from within. And I think that's actually what the Asuran are doing here. They are not opening their technologies to the rest of Cantha so much as they're trying to bring in, for example, as we recall, Scarlet as Sylvari actually completed all 3 of the schools, or the Asuran colleges in Radasum. So there is precedent for that. And I think, weird precedent, by the way, because we remember when the Asurans first encountered the Sylvari, they did not even treat them as fully sentient. There is some precedent for that, and so it sounds like an actual very shrewd move on the part of Ludo and the Asurans in general. Okay, so let's hear from the Char. I do quite like the Char. I like Char launch Char, Guild Wars 2 launch Char, even a little bit more than what they are now. But for example, I absolutely loved the Char Civil War in Icebreed Saga, particularly the first half of Icebreed Saga when the story was good. Just Coast's amazing experience, story-wise and map-wise. So let's hear what's going on here.
Krisha, Imperator of the Blood Legion and elected representation from the Char. I'd be lying if I said tensions weren't high at the Citadel. With Bangar's trial nearing, another civil war isn't impossible. Even behind bars, Bangar commands respect from his most loyal. Although weakened, the Dominion is still a threat. However, the Imperators are mostly aligned. Imperator Malice of the Ash Legion joins me today in support. Ephraim sends his. You may have heard the whispers, but there are calls for another Con-Ur to rise. The Imperators don't disagree, but the Trial of Embers will wait until we've decided Bangar's fate. That is our first priority.
Okay, so I've already talked about the Bangar thing. I'm not going to beat that up anymore. I just want to address the Con-Ur thing really quick. I'm also not going to give like an entire military treatise on whether keeping Bangar alive or killing him would be better for the Char to prevent a civil war. I'm not going to go into that because I've talk for the next 45 minutes. Um, the Conor thing. So certainly we are going to see that in future story as long as ArenaNet continues to produce story. They are going to get to that at some point. Probably, I would speculate, in the next, if not the next expansion, the one after that. There's no way they inserted that without planning to get to it at some point in time. That is way too much of a thing that the community is going to latch onto. If the community doesn't catch it like right up front, and I these days I stay out of the forums, I stay off of the subreddit. But if people aren't already talking about that, they're going to at some point. That is a really big deal that the Char may get another Conor, and of course it's been kind of bantered about for a long time, but it'll be a really big deal. The only thing I ask, ArenaNet, if you were listening at all, don't make it Ritlock. That is the only thing I ask. That is like the last thing we need, is, besides the commander being like the Dovahkiin, is for Ritlock to also be like the end all be all. We got the commander and his or her buddy are like both like just the big shots. Like if it was like Ephraim would be really cool. Bring someone in out of nowhere, like imagine the intrigue if like this Char comes out of nowhere and suddenly rises to power very quickly in a Ryland sort of way and becomes the Conor, and it raises, but legitimately is the Conor, doesn't just assert power, and thus there is a problem where we don't know what the loyalties of the Char race as a whole are and stuff. That would all be really cool. Ritlock as the Conor would not be cool. It would just be like expected and generic and boring. Please, 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 do not do that. Let's hear from the Silvari.
I am firstborn Dagonet. Keith and I have ventured from the Grove to represent the Silvari. The Pale Tree sends her regards. Her healing has been a slow process, but her spirits remain bright and focused on our growth. Our people experienced a deep wound when Mordremoth rose and fell. As a people, we have many questions about where we come from, what purpose we serve following the Elder Dragon's death. Who are we as a society? Many have decided to leave our home in search of these answers. Finding direction and purpose, that is our focus. As the Pale Tree heals, so do the rest of us.
Okay, so I think that's all like really well written. I think they did a really good job with the Silvari piece here. It is super weird that the Pale Tree is still not healed. And versus, saying, oh, well, Arena just never got around to it. They neglected that. That's like the easy answer. Let's put that off to the side. There could be a lore answer. There could be several different lore answers, honestly, for why the Pale Tree is not recovered. One of the ones that I find particularly interesting, and there's a valid question of what this means for all the Silvari, is, so at some point during Heart of Thorns, we transitioned from this idea that, like, the Silvari born of the Pale Tree, this all came from, like a seed being planted upon the teachings of Silvari, and like that tree grew up out of that. But then we learned in the Silvari story very early on, it's like level 20 story, I think, personal story, that in fact there was another tree somewhere out there. We learned that from, Malik, I think? No, is it Malik? Anyway, there's a Silvari that we learned this from. Came from somewhere else completely. And ultimately, this seems to all kind of maybe or maybe not kind of get tied into this idea that we learn in Heart of Thorns that the Silvari are in fact minions of Mordremoth. So what does that mean for the Pale Tree? Was the Pale Tree a lieutenant of Mordremoth in some way, shape, or form, albeit a lieutenant that does not follow Mordremoth? But is that relationship that direct, the way like the Shatterer is related to Kralkatorrik? And if so, is it possible for the Pale Tree to recover? Is it even possible for the Pale Tree to survive without Mordremoth? Whereas maybe the Silvari will, because they are further removed from Mordremoth as an initial point of origin. Can the Pale Tree even survive without Mordremoth? That may be one, in terms of my limited understanding of the lore, maybe one potential explanation for why the Pale Tree might not, in fact, ever recover. And may inevitably cease to be, although I don't know that they would ever do that within the game, simply because that would really be problematic for creating new Silvari characters, right? Like that would be kind of a story problem at some point. Let's hear from the North.
I am Scotty, son of Newt Whitebear. Sends his best. Old man just can't say no to a good brawl. Expected to heal just fine. just as our people are healing, unsure of how to approach the spirits, how we can help them, if we can help them.
The Sylvari share in your pain. The Pale Tree. That's been a process.
Aye. Looking ahead has been our focus. Our scouting parties have returned to the far north to explore the villages and homesteads cut off from Holbrook for decades. We've also got eyes on the sons of Svanir. Rather, what remains of them. Most fell with Jormag. Those that remain, broken, lost. If we can offer any rehabilitation, we will. But we won't welcome more violence to Holbrook.
My queen. Thank you all for your remarks. We gather on mutual ground as allies. For some, friends. We suffered the Elder Dragons. We saw a new Alona and Cantha. We've endured much. But now, Tyria has the promise of tomorrow. The last decade was cruel, but standing united today shows promise that my father only dreamt of. However, it is not on kind terms that we gather. The Alliance was formed as a reaction to a new threat. Almost a year ago now, demons attacked our villages and farmlands. Your cities and homes.
48 dead in the mountains. An entire village burned to the ground.
One attacked the grove.
2, just outside the gates of Rata Novus. They stank.
No casualties should be accepted. These attacks were calculated, I've heard. Our perpetrator? The Cryptus.
Cryptus?
And what exactly are these Cryptus? Where did they come from?
The more pertinent question, how did the Queen discern this information? Tone.
I've dealt with an Emperor's horde of petty banter, so I pivot. Queen Jenna, care to elaborate?
This information is as novel to me as it is to the Alliance.
I've heard rumors of your trustworthiness, Your Majesty.
No hyperbole until the Queen has spoken.
I have a question. This isn't a tavern brawl. How does she know that?
I need to confer with the elders.
Enough!
Enough!
I see the triviality of Tyrian politics has not ceased its endless parade. Shall we have a mature discussion?
Introducing representation from the Astral Ward. Iskarin.
Iskarin.
I apologize for my friend's theatrics.
And Frode, Warden of the Astral Ward.
What's going on, Jenna? Answers.
Queen, if you wish to leave with all your limbs intact.
Calm, all of you. And I thought the war bands needed babysitting. Frode, was it?
Indeed. Admittedly, I expected worse. Wayfinder, under duress as always.
Wayfinder. Ah. Should have known you had a leg in this race.
I'll try talking to them.
Okay, got a little catching up to do. I'm not going to really go back to much of anything that the Norn discussed, except to point out that in Icebrood Saga, and particularly like the second half of Icebrood Saga, the crisis of the spirits of the wild kind of got subordinated to the Char Civil War in terms of storyline, and probably could have been a much bigger deal. And quite frankly, that completely escaped me at the time as well. In fact, it's only now playing through here in Janthir Wilds when it's mentioned by Scardy Knudsen that is a crisis for the Norn, that it really occurs to me that should be a crisis for the Norn. And it should have occurred to me much sooner. After all, they have an entire monument in Holbrook dedicated to the spirits that they had already lost. So I do think that's a pretty good touch. I also think probably ArenaNet really scrambled to figure out what the Norn could actually say it all. But at least they said something, unlike Counselor Amon and Spear Marshal Zaim over here, or Commodore Mariner and Ellen Keel. Good to see Ellen manage to find her time away from her various suitors and actually show up. Good for her. I do like that Counselor Ludo over here is about ready to fight. So, Isgarin and Frode make their appearance, and thus the Astral Ward is now known. I think I called them the Astral Counselor or something earlier. Astral Ward. That is what they're called. So I don't like. And by the way, that cutscene, Jenna looks ridiculous. Like, I understand they were trying to make her look like she was increasingly getting more and more annoyed and kind of disgusted. And right there towards the end, they do kind of nail the disgusted look on her face. But while she makes the goes through that process of going from normal Jenna to disgusted Jenna, that is like, they probably needed a little bit more time to get that right. She looks like developmentally challenged or something. Like, it is not a good look. Unfortunate. Isgarin's appearance. I don't like when they do that, and it's highly predictable. And I remember someone else that I was watching, I don't remember if it was Muckluck or Wooden Potatoes, predicted that this council was going to get interrupted by some appearance of something, because that's highly predictable ArenaNet behavior, and really kind of highly predictable like MMO gaming behavior in general. I don't particularly like it either. I will note it is in character for Isgarin, at least. Like, that whole thing was very much in character for Isgarin, so we have that at least. Alright, Caladra Sparrowhawk from the Dominion of Winds. Who is Isgarin? What is Isgarin? I've never seen one like him before. Is he the same as those Exalted who helped defend the Ares walls from Jormag? They both float. Was the Aerie under threat from Jormag? And that was defended by Exalted? What? What is this reference to? I have no idea what this is in reference to. And clearly I'm just, like, forgetting something, I assume? Isgarin is a seer. Like the Exalted, though, he's here to help us. Alright, what is she talking about? When was the Aerie under... Oh, there were some Tengu way up here in Drizzlewood Coast, right? There were some Tengu. Yes, there were. And so they were under threat from Jormag. I don't remember Exalted being there. What? I have no idea. Someone smarter on the lore than me can figure that out, or I'm forgetting something, obviously. Counselor Amon, I have a bad feeling about this. Who is he? Beings using such powerful and ancient magic have not historically boded well for the people of Alona. No, the people of Alona are on a real, losing streak. They've had a rough go of it. Although he does look identical to a Jinn, and they see Jinn all the time. Kind of interesting that she didn't just say, who's this Jinn? But this time, the ancient being is on our side. Isgarin wants to help Tyria. So, of course, that's a reference to my favorite bad guy that was killed in the worst possible way. Really bad story writing. Palawa Joko, right? That was gross from a story writing perspective. All right, Skarda Knudsen. Commander, who are these strangers barging in? I want answers now, before my fists go looking for them. All right, so that's a pretty Norn thing to say, I guess. I don't necessarily love it, but that's pretty Norn. Calm, Skardy. They're friends. Hear them out, please. And of course, the commander's got to be the person to calm everyone down, because they all love the commander, because Dovahkiin. Counselor Ludo. Cryptus, the Astral Ward, and a seer? You knew about all of this, and you didn't tell me? Okay. This makes sense from an Asuran point of view. But this whole "and you didn't tell me" in all would resonate a lot more if it was someone that we were a little closer to. But quite frankly, we've had extremely limited interaction with Counselor Ludo in the past. In fact, I had forgotten who she was, and I only remembered after looking into it that she was on the Arcane Council, and I think we had some interactions maybe during Icebrute Saga where we talked to the entire council. But I would not have otherwise remembered. So this idea that we would confide in her is a little weird. But of course the Asurans, they value knowledge and so forth. Who would I be to burden you further? Aren't you up to your ears in paperwork? That's a real cop-out, Commander, but okay. Emperor Scene. Isgarin is a seer, is he not? Navon has shared much of her historical knowledge with me. I would not have expected that any seer still existed, let alone have one appear right in front of us. Well, it is a surprise for all of us, isn't it? Only one left. If you know of them, then you'll know that he is here as an ally. So that is good. That reference goes all the way back to Guild Wars 1 and the role that the Seers played as we were battling the Mersat, right? It's been a long time since I played the first Guild Wars. What I don't know, so they did help us in our battle with the. In fact, I think they were the ones who sent us on the quest to ascend so that we could battle the Mersat. Is that correct? It's been a long, long time. However, does that mean they were always benevolent? I don't know that that is the case or not. But genuinely, I don't know. Maybe it is the case. No idea. All right. We are already at an hour. That's amazing. Okay, this is truly a long instance if you really want to soak up everything. Commodore Lawson Mariner, of course, he's part of the leadership here at Lion's Arch, is Garin. I know that name from the people of Garenhof because, preceding Soto, as we may recall, there was the tower, Wizard's Tower outside of Garenhof, now gone because the Wizard's Tower is elsewhere, and you can take a scroll to get there, or later, once you have a homestead, you'll have another method of getting there, right? But what is going on? Keel, call the Lion Guard. Well, it's an appropriate reaction. After all, we're in Lion's Arch. No need for the Lion Guard. Is Garen and Frode come in peace? They'll explain. And then he immediately chills out. No longer scared. Dagonet. Commander, while I certainly have had my fair share of life-altering realizations, hasn't he? I'd still like to know what this is all about. Should I be concerned? No need for concern, Dagonet. The Astral Ward have much to offer the Alliance. Alright, so now we can talk to Frode. And in fairness, the Astral Ward should have much to offer the Alliance. The Astral Ward, if they behave benevolently, should have much to offer anyone. They've been keeping the Cryptus at bay for, hundreds of years? While we were busy doing the dragon thing, and of course, they didn't help with the dragons, and that was a conversation during Soto, and may come up again. But they have been protecting us from the Cryptus. They are obviously incredibly powerful. We saw that with Isgaren and Eparch and so forth. So, and Frode is no joke either. So let's see here.
Ready as they'll ever be. Get to the point.
They thrive on the brink of chaos.
They've all endured enough trauma for a lifetime. Patience.
If we're measuring trauma and lifetimes, they wouldn't compare.
So throughout Soto, Isgaren was a real jerk. And I think people find a lot of this to kind of be in his character, some of these lines. I actually think, I don't know, I feel like they actually ratcheted it up a tiny bit. That he kind of went from like 8.5 to 9 on the jerk scale between Soto and here, but maybe that's just my perception. Maybe I don't remember. I disliked 3/4 of Soto so much that I've blocked most of it from my memory. All right, take my place.
Thank you for allowing us the time to speak to you all today. I apologize for the dramatic entrance. Again, I am Frode of the Astral Ward.
Frode. I've heard that name.
The Ward has been cloaked in shadow for centuries, protecting you from threats unknown and unlike the Elder Dragons.
The Cryptus.
The source of our demon infestation, I take it?
Beings of the Mists who are no longer a problem. Not right now. Our Wayfinder, your commander, can speak to that.
I joined their fight. The Cryptus have been contained.
I wouldn't be surprised if some still attempted to breach our realm, but they aren't organized.
He speaks truth, as the commander can attest. Hesitant trust is advised. Isgaren revealed himself to me not long before he revealed himself to all of you.
The Cryptus are harbingers of what may come next from the mists.
And you say they're no longer a threat, Wayfinder?
I've been to their realm myself. They've been stabilized.
When Su Won passed, Tyria's essence bled into the veil beyond the mists. We are no longer shielded by her power. Every eye turned toward us in that moment.
And likely more. We glow brighter than we did before. Tyria is a unique world, coveted by those beyond.
To summarize, our demons are Cryptus, and you two, the Astral Ward, are some sort of secret organization that fights them?
Not just Cryptus, but any intruder from another realm. We've certainly faced other threats that were not born of Tyria. Why didn't you reveal yourself sooner?
Or help us with the Elder Dragons?
I will answer all of your questions. But this is not the right venue.
I'm inclined to agree. Whatever this information is, I gather it's sensitive in nature.
I imagine the room needs a moment to reflect. Shall we pause and reconvene in smaller council?
After our councils have ended, I will speak with any of you. Whatever questions you may have, I will try to answer them.
I do kind of like how Asgarin sounds like exhausted by the idea of having to talk to people. That is somewhat entertaining. All right, so a couple of interesting things just came up, and I want to address them before we go and start talking to like these little groups. So hopefully none of this dialogue like triggers on its own. I'm afraid this one might. This one right behind us.
Commander, with us. We'd like to continue the conversation.
Yeah, and we will in a moment, Krisha. But I have things I want to talk about first. Just be patient. All right. So Isgarin said something a minute ago, and this is kind of like core lore related to Soto and stuff, but I have a problem with it. When Suwan passed, Tyria's essence bled into the veil beyond. The mists. You, we, and remember he did like the you, and then he caught himself and included himself in the conversation. He went to we, so he changed his language to be more inclusive in terms of the Astral Ward being part of who was no longer shielded. We are no longer shielded by her power. Every eye turned towards us in that moment, and likely more. We glow brighter than we did before. I have a real problem here. I think a tiny mistake was made by ArenaNet when writing that and when establishing that as lore, even back in Soto, when they also mentioned, because Isgarin said something similar during Soto that we are no longer invisible to no longer protected by Suwan, and this was how they kind of tied the end of the Dragon Cycle to their upcoming story. Now I've been saying for a long time that the Mist was where they needed to go with the story. I was saying that even before Soto. I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that anyone in ArenaNet has ever heard anything I said, even once, or that they cared in the slightest. It just so happens that I think they went the direction that I also would have gone, which is to make the Miss an opportunity for them to do anything they wanted. They kind of fumbled that with Soto, but they still have ample opportunity to do a lot of cool things with it. Not only to provide antagonists, but also provide new maps and extraordinary, fun things to do. Hopefully they do more with it in the future. However, Suwan told us that she essentially created this world. So if it was her presence that protected this world from those things in the mist, then this world has always been protected, which raises the question of why there were ever threats from elsewhere in the mist in the first place, which we know that there have been. In fact, the Mersat were sent here from elsewhere, were they not? And I don't like Wooden Potatoes is like the world's resident expert on Mersat, so like someone needs to ask him. But if we've always been protected by Suwan, how did these other things, and for that matter, like Isgarin and Maban and stuff, like how did all this come to be if we were protected by Suwan in the first place? I don't understand it. There's probably some obscure answer, but it really jumps out to me as like a really weird thing. I also have a question about Scardy Newton here recognizing the name Frode. One, apparently there are so few Norn that like your first name is known unless it's just a particularly unusual first name or something. Beyond that, we know that Isgarin is like very, very old. We know Dagda's very, very old. I don't recall, and I assume that was both for racial reasons. Isgarin being a seer, Dagda being a what is she? The word escapes me now, but yeah, one of those things. And kind of so forth within like the Astral Ward, that some of them were very old simply by virtue of their race or whatever. But does the Wizard's Tower actually prolong life? Does being a member of the Astral Ward prolong life? And if so, is Frode like actually like a figure from like Norn history books? And that's what Scardy is like kind of making note of there. I am curious to know more about that. I'm sure it'll come up at some point. They didn't write that dialogue by accident. That's not something you would include unless you had a reason for including it. I'm curious to kind of see where that goes in the future. All right. So we are going to go ahead and listen in. We've been going so long already. We're already over an hour 10. Let's hear these other conversations before we wrap this up.
Look at them over there. Can I assume they're scheming?
No, Counselor. Assumptions are very often incorrect. We'll have plenty of time to ask our questions. And I have some for you, as we were tasked. Before the Arcane Council, my research says that you were the Dean of Statics.
I am the Dean of Statics. If I dedicated all of my time to the Council, my brain would melt and drip onto the floor.
Talented and busy. You remind me of my sister. Say, you and I should plan a visit. We're supposed to be making friends after all. I would love to host you in our labs. I'm very curious to see how they stand up to such a precise eye.
If they stand. I would love to give you my assessment, Empress. And I'm also happy to waive my consultation fees in good faith.
Good faith indeed. I see you two are getting along.
All right, so I am no fan of June. I found her to be a very annoying character, and I've repeatedly referred to her as like the Canthan Elon Musk. I do kind of like get a kick out of the idea of her hanging out with the Arcane Council and like how that would go. That would be kind of entertaining. So I do kind of enjoy this exchange in general. I get a kick out of Counselor Ludo saying that she would waive her consultation fee. Like that's kind of a fun touch. All right, let's see what's going on over here.
My people have recently begun early exploration of Dislana. The dragon brand is weakening, all these years later. Dangerous place, rampant with harpies. I don't see them helping us. Perhaps the Hecate?
I've only been to the ruins of Foreigner, parts of Korna. I should visit more of Alona. When you call Dislana dangerous, what do you mean?
You've been to the best tourist attractions at least. You should visit. Dislana is taxing. Harpies are dominant, which makes it hostile territory. But my people used to hide in the mountains. We have records and rumors of temples, settlements. I don't know if anything waits for us there, but it's worth looking.
Sounds like the Greater North. Homesteads long displaced by Jormeg's storm. No telling if there are any survivors.
We defeat the Elder Dragons, and this is our reward. The scraps of what used to be.
All right. I guess I'm good with that. I do have this kind of. So I'm not a big fan of him saying he's been a foreigner and her brushing it off like, oh yeah, so you were at the tourist attraction. Like Zaim was the one we had to recruit to take us into Foreigner in the first place because no one else would even go there. Nobody would go there. And now she's like, I guess you saw the nice spots. No, it's not a nice spot, Iman. You never went there. So I kind of don't I don't appreciate that. I don't, in terms of like, I don't know how they're trying to portray him on there. Like I don't know what the writers are trying to achieve there because it is inconsistent with our actual gameplay experiences in season 4. And of course, for once, Bram is downplaying his role and being like humble, which these are things that are not consistent with our experiences with Bram. But he's really downplaying. He saved our lives in Foreigner, and he saw quite a bit there. And well, no, he didn't fight his way through Foreigner. He came in through a portal. Him and what's her name, Rox. But just saying, like he's really downplaying this, and she's like making a big spectacle out of it, and that's super weird. All right, so let's come over to the main conversation.
Anise introduced us. Their friendship was just as much a surprise to me.
We sought another ally ahead of the forum. We've known it was time to reveal ourselves to the world. Figured this would be better than a more public spectacle.
That inclination isn't wrong. Why now, though?
The Cryptus may be controlled or contained, but my words should cause fear. Tyria is as blood in water.
And what exactly is attracted to that blood?
Any number of beasts and beings. I've no reason to think we're in imminent danger, but I suspect something draws closer.
And we all need to prepare. The Astral Ward is ready to help in any way we can. So you've numbers, then? Some. Fewer after the Cryptus. We bled on the edge of that blade.
What do you propose we do?
Focus on your affairs. We'll get nowhere without some degree of control. Your nations are fragile still. Heal. Nourish.
We'll be establishing pacts with our neighbors. I suggest you do the same.
Wise. On that subject, I'd like to offer some information on the Isle of Janthir.
Janthir. A storm looms over that place. Blood. That is not a territory I wish to cross.
I don't expect you to, but we may find more allies throughout those lands. The Lowland Coden.
My father spoke of them briefly. He left their territory untouched. Those are bonds I have not maintained.
I imagine there's more to this suggestion, Iskarin?
We should speak within thicker walls. Yes.
Wayfinder, I don't think anyone here would be better equipped to help form these bonds. You are not only a representative of the Astral Ward, but of Tyria. Look around this room. Take it in.
I could support that notion. Yes.
Utilize Moon Camp. It's only kicking up dust otherwise. We'll send ward to your aid. All your aid. The ward will establish a gateway between our outpost and the human city. With the Queen's blessing.
Blessing granted. I support this, and you, Commander. Now is the time to fortify. The Countess will meet you in Divinity's Reach.
Alright, so a couple of things really quick that I like going on here. One, I like Isgarin saying that the primary thing that people need to do, heal, nourish. I love that, like, because yes, the dragon cycle ended, and yes, we dealt with the Cryptus thing, and now we're going to go to the Isles of Janthir. But while the commander does these things, this should be a period of calm for many of these nations. And going all the way back to the idea that maybe there was some secret correspondence over here, this confidential note way over there, between like Krisha and the Queen here, about trying to create some additional calm between the Char and the humans. Like, in general, this should be a time when, you know, when the Pale Tree can recover, when the Norn can learn more about the spirits of the wild and what to do next. And like, so I do like that for most of the world, this should be a time of calm. I also like the suggestion, putting aside my question about like, why now can things from the mist see, like when there were things from the mist before, putting all that aside. I like the idea of this truly unknown, very ominous threat that may be closing in, completely out of our control and completely out of our sight. Like, I really like that feeling. That's a cool vibe. So some fun stuff there that I like. And of course, it's going to be the commander to go to Janthir, but we wouldn't have an expansion if the commander didn't. So let's kind of lean into that. Yes, the commander is going to go to Janthir. And Krisha and Mouse are going to talk to us about it.
I have witnessed cleaner executions.
Krisha, think I'm going with the commander to Janthir. I feel a professional pull. Have little intel on that location, or these Coden, and it feels vital. Or intriguing, at least.
An imperator leaving her post to get her claws dirty. Care to steal my mate, too? Go. Be our eyes. I can cover for us.
I'll see you there, Commander.
So, I like that we have Mouse going with us. That's fun. That's cool. I'm looking forward to that. I kind of like that line from Krisha about stealing my mate. It did cause me to wonder, though, are she and Ritlock back together? Is that someone else? Yeah, was she actually with Bangar for a while? I have so much interest in Krisha's love life. So many questions, none of which seem to be answered. Okay, so one of the most annoying things, while that is a very long non-combat instance, there is a lot there in terms of lore, and it is pretty interesting, so I can kind of let that slide. However, we're about to see one of one of the things that annoys me most about this expansion, it's a really small thing. It should be really easy for ArenaNet to fix. It just irks me because it shows that they did not as much attention to detail as they paid throughout this particular chapter. There's one thing that they paid zero attention to, and we're about to see it. Mastery point earned. You got your first mastery point. But we don't have access to any of the masteries yet. Why is that relevant? Watch what we get as a reward for this instance. A whole bunch of Kodan experience. Takes effect immediately upon receipt. Grants a large amount of Kodan experience. 127,000 experience. That doesn't do anything because we don't have an experience bar right now. 0 out of 0 experience because we haven't unlocked a mastery. What in the world is that? It is nonsense. How did they omit that? It is egregious. It's ridiculous. And truly not a big deal because you get into the maps and you start generating experience, you do events and stuff, and it becomes immaterial. But it's the dumbest thing. It was completely preventable, and they failed to prevent it. Kills me. All right, I'm over it. Got it out of my system. Overall, for a very long non-combat instance, super cool. This is where we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for tonight because we have been plugging along for an hour and 21 minutes, and it was all like politics and lore. So if you can make politics interesting, then I guess they did a pretty decent job of that. It was not terrible. When we come back next time, we will go ahead and actually go to Janthir and start to see these Kodan and start to see what the world there is all about. And I think that it is a couple of the most beautiful maps they have created thus far. 2 of my favorite maps aesthetically in the entire game. And there are some other likable things going on as there well. So there as well. So we have a lot to look forward to. We really do. The next couple chapters on this playthrough will be a lot of fun. So looking forward to that, and I will see you again when that time comes. Have a good evening.